All right, let's dive into a mathematical mystery. Now, this one's been solved for centuries, but the proof is just so profound, so beautiful that we have to talk about it. It's the story of a formula that, well, that simply can't exist. So take a look at these incredible fractal images. You might think they're just some cool abstract art, but they're not. Each one is actually a map that shows you the solutions to polynomial equations. Like x squared plus 1. And their insane complexity, it's hinting at a really deep secret. The formulas we use to solve them have a limit. And that gets us to the real heart of it, right? We all learned the quadratic formula in school, probably with some pain. And believe it or not, there are even crazier formulas for equations with x cubed and x to the fourth. But after that, nothing. It just stops. In this explainer, we're going to find out exactly why that quest for a universal formula hit a completely impossible wall. Okay, so to really get a grip on this problem, we first have to build the world where these equations actually live. And it turns out we kind of had to invent our numbers as we went, just to keep up with the questions math was throwing at us. It was like a game of mathematical whack-a-mole. First, you've just got your basic counting numbers, but then an equation like 2x plus 4 equals 0 pops up. Can't solve it. So boom, we invent negative integers. Great. But then you hit 2x plus 1 equals 0. Well, now we need fractions, so we invent the real numbers. Surely that's got to be everything, right? Nope. X squared plus 1 equals 0 has no real solution. So we had to invent one last thing, imaginary and complex numbers. And this is where complex numbers become the absolute hero of the story. Because with them, the game of whack-a-mole finally ends. The fundamental theorem of algebra basically guarantees that no matter what crazy polynomial you cook up using complex numbers, all of its solutions are going to be complex numbers too. They can't escape. We finally have a complete, self-contained universe for all of our equations. Now, we've got our universe of numbers, but here's where things get really interesting. It has to do with this deep structural difference between an equation's ingredients, its coefficients, and its final products, the solutions. Okay, so here's the crucial point. The coefficients of an equation, the numbers in front of the x's, they're a strict ordered list. You swap them around, you get a totally different equation. Simple. But the solutions, they're an unordered set. You can shuffle them around all day long and the original equation doesn't change one bit. Why? Because they're just multiplied together in the end. They are perfectly, fundamentally symmetric. So this symmetry thing has a really bizarre consequence. Imagine a formula is like a smooth, predictable machine. You put the coefficients in one end and it spits out one of the solutions. But because the solutions are swappable, you could trick the machine. You could take the inputs on a little journey, a little loop that secretly swaps the solutions, and then bring the inputs right back to where you started. And the machine, being predictable, it would now point to a different solution for the exact same starting numbers. That's a flat-out contradiction. It means no simple, well-behaved formula can possibly work. All right, so if a simple machine breaks, what special tools do our known formulas use? Let's open up the toolkit and look at these things called radicals. You know them better as square roots, cube roots, and all their cousins. Let's start with the easiest case beyond a straight line, a quadratic equation. It has two solutions, and they're perfectly interchangeable. How in the world can you build a machine, a formula, that can handle that symmetry? Enter the square root. Now, we usually think of the square root of 4 as just 2, but of course it's also negative 2. The function is naturally two-valued. You can even visualize it as this two-layered surface. And here's the magic. If you trace a loop with your input on that surface, the two outputs actually swap places. This behavior is the perfect mirror of our two symmetric solutions. The square root is like it was made for this job. Okay, so a square root is perfect for a simple swap. But what about a cubic equation? It has 3 solutions. Now you can do more than just swap 2 of them. You can cycle all 3. You can shuffle them in really weird ways. How do you handle that? This needs a much fancier move called a commutator. The best way to think about it is like turning a Rubik's Cube. Imagine you do a turn, then another turn, then you undo the first turn and then undo the second one. You'd think you'd be right back where you started, but you're not. The cube is all scrambled. That's a commutator. And with 3 or more solutions, you can pull this same trick to shuffle them in ways a simple root function just can't do on its own. So how did mathematicians get around this? Well, the trick is just pure genius. You build a more complicated machine by nesting the roots. You literally take the output of one root function, say a square root, and you plug it directly into the input of another one, like a cube root. And when you do that, this beautiful pattern just emerges. For quadratic with its simple swap, you need one root. For cubic with its commutator, you need two nested roots. For quartic, that's degree 4, you need 3 nested roots to handle a commutator of commutators. It really seemed like they'd cracked the code. For any new level of complexity, you just add another root to the machine. Which brings us to the big, obvious question. For an equation with 5 solutions, the quintic, why not just add a 4th nested root to the chain and call it a day? And this is where the whole system just breaks down. The moment you have 5 or more things to shuffle, the very structure of their permutations becomes fundamentally, infinitely more complex. You can create commutators, and then you can create commutators of those commuters, and then commutators of those. You can keep nesting these scrambles infinitely deep, and at every single level, you are still scrambling the solutions. The complexity never resolves, it never bottoms out. And that is the knockout punch of the proof. Our formula-making toolkit is built by nesting a finite number of roots. You can use 1, 2, 100, a million, it doesn't matter, it's a finite number. But the permutations of 5 solutions have an infinite structure of complexity. A finite machine can never, ever be powerful enough to solve an infinite puzzle. And so the conclusion is just completely unavoidable. There is no, and there can never be, a general formula for the quintic equation using the tools of arithmetic and radicals. The beautiful, endless complexity of its solutions simply outruns the very tools we built to try and capture them. I mean, it is a stunning result. It reveals this fundamental limit to what our formulas can even express. And it really makes you wonder, right? What other beautiful, intricate, impossible problems are out there in the mathematical universe, just waiting for us to understand exactly why they can't be solved?